The dream started the night Mara Voss turned 47. Not nightmares, exactly. She'd had nightmares for 20 years. The screaming, the orange sky over what used to be Frankfurt, the sound a city makes when a weapon the size of a small moon decides it doesn't belong there anymore. Those she knew. Those she'd learned to metabolize the way the body metabolizes poison, slowly with permanent damage, but survivable. These were different. These were something looking through her, the way you look through a dirty window. Patient. Measuring. She reported them to the ESD psych office the way you're supposed to. She filled out the forms. They ran the scans, checked her against the database of known telepathic resonance signatures from the War of 2006, the harvester frequency, cold and wide as the space between stars, and found nothing conclusive. The technician had used that exact word, conclusive. She'd hated him for it in a small, private way. Residual trauma expression, the report said. Monitor and resubmit in 90 days. Mara filed it and went back to work. She'd been flying tug runs out of Lunar Station Kessler for 6 years. It wasn't glamorous work, it wasn't supposed to be. She hauled salvage, mostly. Decommissioned harvester hull plating that the engineers back on Earth still hadn't fully figured out, dragging the great dead slabs of it through low lunar orbit on her rig, the Dusseldorf, a workhorse tug with a cracked secondary gyroscope, that she'd fixed herself 3 times, and that the maintenance pool refused to officially acknowledge. The Dusseldorf didn't care about their opinion, neither did Mara. The new generation of ESD pilots called her the widow, not because of any husband she'd never married, never wanted the particular shape of that loss, but because she'd outlasted every partner she'd ever flown with. Not through heroism, through the stubborn, graceless arithmetic of survival. Brenner died in '09 during the reanimation sweep, when a harvester drone that everyone thought was dead turned out to be something more complicated than dead. Chen had made it to 14 before a hull microcrack took him apart over Mare Imbrium in about 6 seconds. Okafor, her last real partner, had retired to Sao Paulo and then died of cardiac arrest at his daughter's wedding 2 years ago, which felt like the cruelest joke the universe had told yet. So Mara flew alone. The tug was big enough for a crew of 3, and she ran it like a machine runs itself, which is to say quietly and without complaint. She was on approach to salvage Grid 7 when the new ship appeared. She almost missed it. She'd been recalibrating the secondary gyro, again, and the proximity alert had to chirp 3 times before she looked up at the long-range display. The contact was reading as neither harvester nor human-built. It was spherical, small, relative to the things she'd seen, maybe 40 meters across. It came out of the wormhole signature, near the lunar far side at a speed that should have been impossible for something without visible propulsion, and then it simply stopped. Mara stared at it for a long moment. Then she keyed the open channel to Kessler. "This is Voss on the Dusseldorf. I've got an unidentified contact at grid reference 7 Bravo 9er. It's not in any registry I can pull. You want to tell me what I'm looking at? Or do you want me to just keep dragging scrap while you figure it out?" Kessler's response took 11 seconds, which told her everything she needed to know about how frightened they already were. "Voss, maintain position. Do not approach the contact. We're escalating." The Security Council escalated in the way bureaucracies escalate when something genuinely unprecedented appears, loudly, in multiple directions at once, with a great deal of confident-sounding language attached to decisions that nobody was actually confident about. Within 4 hours, 3 ESD warships had been repositioned to cover the object. Within 6, Director General Saavedra was on a call with the heads of every major member state, and the words preemptive strike were being used by people who should have known better. Mara listened to the open band chatter from the Dusseldorf's cockpit, eating a ration bar she didn't taste, and felt the thing in her dreams stir. Not a threat. That was the first clear impression she'd ever had from it. Not hunger, not calculation, not the cold vast wrongness of harvester contact. Something more like recognition. The particular feeling of seeing someone across a crowded room who has been looking for you, and finding that you have also, without knowing it, been looking for them. She keyed the ESD tactical net. "This is Voss. That thing out there is not hostile. Don't shoot it." The silence that followed was the specific silence of people deciding whether to be polite or dismissive about a statement they have already decided to ignore. Commander Acheby's voice came back flat and professional. "Voss, you're a tug operator. Please stay off the tactical net." "I'm a tug operator who's been having alien contact dreams for 6 weeks, and whose name is probably in whatever file you've been ignoring from the psych office. So, you can tell me to stay off the net, Or you can ask me what I know your call. Another silence. Longer this time. What do you know, Voss? She put down the ration bar. It's not alone. I mean, there's nothing else near it. But whatever's inside it has been in contact with others, like me. People who survived direct proximity to the harvesters during the war. It's been finding us. Mapping us. Trying to figure out if we're going to do the same thing we did to it. Which is, shoot first. The Security Council shot first. The salvo from the ESD warship Johannesburg hit the sphere at 0347 hours lunar time. And what happened next was the kind of thing that takes years to fully understand and seconds to experience. The sphere didn't explode. It didn't fight back. It folded. That was the only word Mara had for it, watching on long-range optical. Folded itself down into something smaller and denser, like a hand closing around a wound, and the energy from the Johannesburg's weapons dispersed around it in a cascade of light that was almost beautiful if you could forget what it meant. It meant they'd heard it. Mara had the Dusseldorf moving before she made the conscious decision to move. Not toward the warships, toward the sphere. Voss. Achibi's voice had a new edge in it. Voss, stand down. I am ordering you to. You're ordering a civilian contractor, Mara said, keeping her voice level with the practice of 20 years. I don't actually have to listen to you. And right now, I'm the only person in local space who isn't shooting at the thing we just wounded. She brought the Dusseldorf in slow. Tug pilots learn to do everything slow and deliberate, and with full awareness that a mistake at close range is a mistake you don't walk away from. She came in with her running lights on full, broadcast on every frequency she could reach, and when she was 300 meters out, she cut the engines entirely and let the tug drift. I'm here, she said out loud and over the general broadcast to the sphere and to anyone listening. I'm not shooting. I don't have anything to shoot with. I'm just here. The sphere unfolded. What came out of it wasn't quite light and wasn't quite language. It passed through the hull of the Dusseldorf, like the hull wasn't there, and it passed through Mara the same way, and when it was done passing through her, she was sitting in her pilot's chair with tears she didn't remember making drying on her face, and she understood. The harvesters were coming back. Not the drones, not the salvage, not the cold dead plating she'd been hauling through orbit for 6 years, the real thing. The harvester fleet, rebuilt and twice the size it had been, drawn back toward Earth by a signal the sphere had been carrying since before the war. A signal it had been trying to warn them about. Had been racing toward them to warn them about. Had been trying to reach the people it could find who would listen. She understood something else too, something the sphere had not quite said, but that she felt in the place where the dreams had been. The harvesters weren't just coming for Earth's core this time. They were coming because the sphere existed. Because wherever the sphere went, a resistance had a chance to form, and the harvesters had learned, in the centuries they'd spent consuming worlds, that a resistance given enough time became a threat. They were coming to end it before it started. The ESD warships were still arrayed behind her. Mara could feel Achibi's hand hesitating over the trigger. Don't, she said quietly. Whatever you're thinking about doing right now, don't. We need every ship we have. Need them for what? She looked at the sphere, which was pulsing very softly now, in a frequency she'd been dreaming about for 6 weeks. For what's coming through that wormhole in about 14 hours. The Harvester flagship came in at a scale that made the first invasion look like a scouting trip. Mara had been 12 years old in 2006 living in Stuttgart, and she remembered the shadow. Not the fires, not the noise, not the specific horror of what followed. Those came later. But the shadow. The way it had moved across the city, the way shadows of clouds move, except this one didn't move on. This one stopped, and then everything changed. The shadow that fell across the moon, 19 hours after the sphere's appearance, was different. It was bigger. It was more deliberate. It had the particular quality of something that had been planning this for a long time, and was no longer interested in being patient about it. The Harvester mothership was 3 times the diameter of the one that had been destroyed in 2006. It began positioning over Earth's northern hemisphere before ESD's deep space tracking array had even finished processing the contact. The drilling beam. That awful, world-eating instrument, the thing that had kept engineers and geologists screaming into each other's ears for years about the Earth's core stability, came down within 12 minutes of orbital insertion. 12 minutes. Either they'd learned something from the first time, or they'd always been capable of this speed and had been patient before, for reasons that didn't translate. Mara was already moving. The sphere had given her something in those moments of contact aboard the Dusseldorf. Not a weapon, not a tactical plan, exactly. more like a key, and the knowledge that there was a lock somewhere that it fit. The harvester ship's command structure was hierarchical in a way human militaries had stopped being after the 20th century. Completely centralized, all authority and all consciousness flowing through a single point, the Queen. They'd known that much from the First War, from the autopsies and the captured drones, and Okun's 20 years of research. But what the Sphere had added was the specific, precise, terrible knowledge of where the Queen would be and what she would be doing when the endgame began. She would come for the Sphere personally, not because she had to, because she couldn't not. The Sphere was a symbol to the harvesters the way flags are symbols to humans, not just meaningful, but sacred in some cold, arithmetic way, the embodiment of everything the harvester expansion was meant to prevent. A Sphere still active meant worlds not consumed, resistances forming, the long, efficient harvest interrupted. The Queen would expose herself rather than let it survive. That's the trap, Mara said, sitting across from Commander Achibi and 3 ESD generals in a briefing room at Kessler that smelled of recycled air and barely concealed panic. She'll come to Area 51. We need to make sure that's the only place the Sphere appears to be. You're proposing we use a 20 billion credit alien AI as bait, Achibi said. I'm proposing we use the thing she can't ignore as bait. That's not the same as the thing itself. Mara laid her hands flat on the table. She'd always done that when she was about to say something she knew would meet resistance. It was a habit from the war, from the days when saying the wrong thing meant someone died. We put the Sphere in isolation, shielded, buried. We put a broadcast emitter somewhere obvious that looks like the Sphere to harvester sensors. We pack the obvious location with everything we have left. And the real Sphere? Stays dark until she's committed. General Park looked at her for a long moment, with the expression of a man who has heard many plans and knows which ones are the plans of desperation and which are the plans of someone who has thought it through all the way to the end. And after the trap, Mara said, she'll survive the first detonation. The Sphere briefed us on this. The Queen has a personal defense field. The briefings from the First War mentioned it. Okun's notes mentioned it, and the Sphere confirmed it. She'll survive and she'll come out on foot. And someone's going to have to drop that field before the second wave can finish it. The silence in the room had a specific weight. Someone? Park said. Someone with a direct fire weapon, clear line of sight, and the nerve to hold position while a harvester queen walks toward them across open ground. Mara was surprised to find that she sounded calm. I've been flying alone for 6 years. I've got the nerve. What I need is a ship fast enough to get the shot and get clear. She didn't get the ship she wanted. She got the Dusseldorf because the Dusseldorf was already hers, and because the ESD's combat-rated fighter inventory was needed for the main engagement. And also, she suspected, because nobody else wanted the particular assignment of standing between a wounded alien queen and the one object in the solar system that Queen would kill a planet to retrieve. The trap worked. It worked the way good traps work, which is to say, it didn't feel like winning while it was happening. The Queen's ship came down on Area 51 like a declaration of war, and like a hammer, and like a thing that had never once been surprised by anything a species as brief as humanity had managed. And the fusion charges that detonated around it sent a column of fire up through the Nevada sky that could be seen from space. And the Queen walked out of the fire. Mara watched her on the targeting display, 30 meters tall or something close to it. The personal field shimmering around her, like heat off summer asphalt, everything bending slightly wrong in the space immediately around her body. She moved with the unhurried certainty of something that had never been stopped, that couldn't conceptualize being stopped, that had watched civilizations burn from one end of the galley to the other, and had never once been made to feel small. The second wave of ESD fighters broke against the field like water off stone. Mara had the Dusseldorf in a low arc coming in from the south, 50 meters off the deck, the kind of altitude that makes proximity alarms lose their minds. She'd disabled the alarm 3 hours ago. It had been distracting her. She had one good shot. The Sphere had been precise about this. The Queen's field had a harmonic resonance flaw, a structural gap in the coverage pattern that occurred at a specific angle relative to the Queen's dorsal axis. Hit it there with enough concentrated energy and the field would fail. Not forever, not even for long, maybe 4 seconds. 4 seconds was enough. The problem with 4 seconds is that you have to be alive for all of them. Mara came in low and fast, jinking the tug in the ugly, scrubbing way that tug pilots learn and fighter pilots disdain, the kind of movement that trades speed for unpredictability. The Queen's weapon systems tracked her. She felt them more than saw them. That old harvester pressure at the edges of her awareness, the psychic static of their technology, and beneath it something she hadn't expected. Recognition. The Queen knew her. Not personally, the harvesters didn't work that way, but the resonance, the frequency the sphere had used to find Mara and people like her. The Queen could feel it coming off her like a beacon, and for 1 second that stretched out like taffy. Mara understood that the Queen was hesitating, not from mercy, from something like curiosity. A human that carried their signal, a human that smelled like the sphere. That 1 second was all she needed. She fired. The shot hit the Queen's field at the precise angle the sphere had specified, and the field went down. And for 4 seconds the most dangerous organism, currently standing on Earth's surface, was as naked and exposed as anything born without armor or weapons, or the certain knowledge that the universe was arranged for your benefit. The ESD wing didn't waste them. She pulled the Dusseldorf up hard enough that the gyroscope she'd been nursing for 3 years finally gave up entirely. The tug went into a flat spin. She wrestled it out somewhere over the Mojave with her palms, bleeding from where her grip had cut them, on the control yoke and the proximity alarm screaming at her from the speaker she'd forgotten to disable. Behind her the Queen was falling. She didn't see it. She didn't need to. She felt it. A specific absence where there had been a presence, like a sound you've been hearing. For so long you only notice it when it stops. The harvester connection. The cold, vast pressure that had been in her dreams for 6 weeks and in her bones for 20 years, easing. Not gone. The fleet was retreating, not destroyed, and there would be other queens, other fleets, other mornings when the shadow came back. The sphere had been clear about that too, in its honest alien way. But for now the drilling had stopped. For now the sky over Nevada was just sky. Mara set the Dusseldorf down in the desert, 7 kilometers from Area 51, because the landing gear was the next thing to go, and she didn't want to be near anyone when it happened. She sat in the cockpit for a while after, with the canopy cracked and the smell of hot sand coming in, listening to the open channel chatter sorting itself out, the way it always does when the shooting stops. The roll calls, the confirmations, the specific exhausted professionalism of people who are not yet ready to process what they've been through. She thought about Brenner, about Chen, about Okafor dying in a suit jacket at his daughter's wedding, while she was out here dragging harvester scrap through lunar orbit and having dreams she didn't understand. She thought about the sphere, which was being moved from its isolation chamber now, which would be studied and catalogued and probably argued over for decades. The thing it had told her in those wordless minutes aboard the Dusseldorf echoed in the particular register that important things tend to echo. They were not done. Humanity was not done. The sphere had gathered survivors from worlds the harvesters had consumed, built the foundation of something that might, with enough time and enough of the stubborn, terrible insistence on existing that humans had demonstrated twice now, become something that could carry the fight back. She wasn't sure she would live to see that fight. She was 47 years old, and her tug was a write-off and her hands were bleeding, and the nearest hospital was 7 kilometers across open desert. She climbed out anyway. There was a specific quality to the light at that hour, the way it came low and gold over the desert floor, the kind of light that doesn't ask anything of you, that just falls equally on whatever it finds. Mara stood beside the Dusseldorf with her bleeding hands, and her cracked gyroscope and the ghost of 6 weeks of alien dreams finally quiet behind her eyes, and she looked up. The sky was empty. Unremarkably, beautifully, stubbornly empty. She started walking. She'd always been better at the walking than the arriving. 20 years of that. 20 years of the next thing, and the thing after that, and the grinding ordinary courage of getting up after the shadow passes, and figuring out what's left to be done. She'd been called the widow, like it was an insult, like outlasting everyone was something to be embarrassed about. And maybe they were right that it wasn't glamorous. Glamour was for fighter pilots and generals and the kind of people who gave speeches. Mara Voss fixed her own gyroscopes, flew her own runs, filed her reports, and showed up. She'd shown up today. She pulled out the comm unit and keyed Commander Achi's frequency. "This is Voss," she said. "Dusseldorf is down for maintenance again. I'm going to need a ride." A pause. Then Achi's voice, which had shed some of its professional flatness, said, "Copy that, Voss. We'll come to you." She pocketed the comm and kept walking through the gold desert light toward whatever came next. Behind her, 800 kilometers up, the last of the harvester fleet was pulling back through the wormhole it had arrived from. The sphere in its shielded chamber below Area 51 pulsed once in a frequency that only the psychically scarred and the quietly stubborn could feel. Something like approval. Something like, again. Mara felt it and almost smiled. She'd had worse reviews.